front of the courthouse in beautiful McDowell County, and we're here to educate the citizens about our problems with fracking and how it got started. We have a local state representative, Mitch, Gillespie, that sponsored the bill that brought fracking to North Carolina when before it was illegal. We're also here to talk about the degradation of the air quality standards in the state and to educate people about what that means to our health and our environment.
I'm Theresa Vic. I'm a community organizer with the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. We have member chapters, organizations all over North Carolina. And what we're doing today is we're bringing to McDowell County information and education on what Representative Mitch Gillespie has brought to all of our backyards. We have just released a study on fracking. The report is Hot Topic, Hydraulic Fracturing and Radiation Exposure. It was actually done by our Duke Nicholas School of the Environment stand-back intern, Allison Mitchell. And what she looks at is the little-known effects of radiation that comes up with the boron fluids. It's not put down, but with the radiation, the radon, the strontium, the radium that comes up with the flowback produced water, and what its waste, what the wastewater stream means and where the waste goes and who's exposed, and it's kind of a good look at that sort of thing. Well, another thing too to note, we're here on fracking, but Representative Gillespie also introduced a bill in this short session that would effectively exempt 75% of air sources from the North Carolina health-based air toxics. They were a 20-year-old law. They were based on risk assessment, health assessment, and stood for almost 20 years, over 20 years actually. And now 75% of sources that emit pollution into the air will only be covered by EPA's technology-based standards, which are not nearly as stringent and not nearly as protective of public health. And that's what that list is. That's the scroll of shame. That's a list of all the North Carolina air toxics that we have standards for now. And if you look at this little thing right here, this is a direct quote from an article from the News and Observer, and this is that's exactly what he said. And it's shameful to me to have a vendetta against the Department of Environment and Natural Resources that's going to bring toxins to everybody's backyard. So that's kind of what we're doing here.
Standards which are minimal. EP standards are always the least you can get by with.
Okay.
We had better standards, and Mitch Gillespie has changed the law so that now we're back to best available technology.
So these are standards just for the energy industry in general, or for?
No, not just the energy. We're talking about paper mills. We're talking about cement plants, which are some of the big dispensers of arsenic in the air. Talking about asphalt plants, where we've had studies that we've presented to, right here to McDowell County, to the County Commission, informing them about how children that are located next to asphalt plants have higher suicide rates and higher brain cancer rates. And they went right on and built the new elementary right next to the asphalt plant. And we've had reports from teachers there that there hasn't been a normal birth since they started working there. So that's not an official study, but the teachers are obviously concerned.
North Carolina was just ranked the 8th most toxic state when they did the top 20. We were number 8.
Good morning, folks. We want to welcome you here on this beautiful morning to Marion, North Carolina, home of Representative Mitch Gillespie, who has had some actions in the House of Representatives that are going to affect everyone's backyard. We decided to come to his backyard to let folks know what he's been up to in Raleigh. Representative Gillespie is one of the representatives that helped legalize fracking in North Carolina, which will potentially contaminate groundwater, surface water, air, and just disrupt the social network of a rural community. In addition, Representative Gillespie sponsored a bill that will exempt almost 75% of all sources of air toxics from our North Carolina health-based air standards, which are based on risk assessment and health assessment. Instead, only thing that will be used will be the EPA's technological standards, which are not as stringent as ours. What you see there in front of Representative Gillespie is the scroll of shame. That is 120 plus chemicals that North Carolina currently regulates more stringently than the EPA. As a matter of fact, I think it's 21, sorry, that we regulate, that EPA doesn't even regulate. And just to let you know, pollution has no political party. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. If you've got toxic air in your neighborhood, you're going to breathe it too. If you have groundwater that's polluted, you're going to drink it too. So we're just starting off today to let the folks in Marion know that we don't appreciate what he's brought to our backyards. To inform you that you are under arrest for the crimes that shall be recited right now.
North Carolina citizens ticket for fracking pollution issued by North Carolina citizens. Incident number fracking bill SB 820. Officers ID the citizens of North Carolina. The date of the incident, July 3rd, 2012. Place of the incident, the North Carolina General Legislature. Incident description. Sponsoring legislation and promoting fracking in the state of North Carolina, which leads to cancer, nervous system damage, respiratory damage, and birth defects. This ticket has been issued for reckless endangerment of North Carolina citizens and children by infliction of pollution of air, water from fracking and radiation that could kill countless citizens, despite the fact that there is no way to know specifically who will die or be disabled. Against this person, Gillespie, Mitch. Address, the North Carolina State House of Representatives. Your sentence, immediate house arrest. This is warranted due to the capricious and deleterious actions he has against the citizens of North Carolina.
This is indictment number 2.
Indictment number 2, the North Carolina citizens ticket for air pollution issued by the North Carolina citizens. Incident HB 952. Officers ID the citizens of North Carolina. The date of the incident, June 21st, 2012. Place of the incident, the North Carolina legislation. Later, incident description, legislation sponsored with malice, aforethought, which did cause thousands of tons of toxic pollutants to be released in North Carolina communities without regard to deleterious effects on public health and the environment. This ticket has been issued for reckless endangerment of North Carolina citizens and children by infliction of pollution of air that could kill and disable countless citizens, despite the fact that there is no way to know specifically who will die or be disabled. Against this person, Mitch Gillespie. Address, the North Carolina House of Representatives. Your sentence, immediate house arrest. This is warranted due to the capricious and deleterious actions he has taken against the citizens of North Carolina.
I don't know if he's going to go quietly or not. Can I pick up the whole thing? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Come on, Mitch. Whoa, he lost his head.
He definitely lost his head. We know that.
Hi, I'm here representing doctors. I'm going to read from the world-renowned scientist, Dr. Theo Colburn, on the health effects of water contamination from fracking. Dr. Theo Colburn, zoologist and president of the Endocrine Disruption Exchange and one of the foremost experts on the health and environmental effects of the toxic chemicals used in fracking fluid, Congress currently allows an exemption that shields fracking processes from federal regulation under the Safe Drinking Water Act that leaves American citizens with no way of knowing what the industry injects in our land. It is federally exempt from being reported. 30 to 70% of water that is injected underground can come back up to the surface in rivers and streams, at people's well sites, and in municipal water sources. Surveys have found that 37% of fracking chemicals are endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors from natural gas, plastics, pesticides, and other industrial chemicals can get into pregnant women and alter the development of their babies. We are facing major epidemics of ADHD, autism, diabetes, obesity, early testicular cancer, and endometriosis. These are all endocrine-driven disorders. These products are injected underground for centuries, perhaps, before they surface. The big problem is, how do we deal with this water when it comes to the surface? The EPA studies are inadequately funded with too little time to determine safety, and the stakeholders are represented by people who have no knowledge of the process or risks and are not scientists. Research is controlled by the corporate-controlled decision makers.
Thank you. Nationwide Insurance just announces fracking damage won't be covered. Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company of New York has become the first major insurance company to say it won't cover damage related to a gas drilling process that blasts chemical-laden water deep into the ground. So homeowners, beware.
This summer I had the privilege of supervising an intern from the Duke Nicholas School of the Environment's Alice and Fred Standback's internship program. What we directed her to look at was the radiation issue as regards to fracking. It's not often talked about, but not only with the chemicals that are injected into the ground to cause the fracking to occur, there are also what they call naturally occurring radioactive materials that come back up with the fracking fluid that comes naturally back up. These can be strontium, these can be radium, and this can be radon gas. And why is this important? Over the past 2 decades, the United States government has supported increased exploration and production of natural gas to try and reduce the dependence on imported fossil fuels. The method that is being used is hydraulic fracturing. Environmental concerns surrounding drilling for gas have increased due to the expansion of shale gas drilling operations. Without rigorous scientific studies, the gas drilling boom sweeping the world will remain an uncontrolled health experiment. And I'm going to skip over the part we've already talked about. The radiation exposure. During the fracking process, many naturally occurring radioactive materials are released. Radioactive materials, including uranium, thorium, and radium, exist naturally in soil and rock. Radium can be taken into the body by eating food, drinking water, or breathing air. About 20% of the radium will remain in the body and enter the bloodstream. A considerable fraction is specially deposited in bone and in teeth. Radium-226 decays to form radon-222, which is a gas. Essentially all air contains radon, which is responsible for most of the dose that Americans receive each year from natural background sources. Let's go on to one of the things that our intern found that is also not talked about is the radiation and air quality. One of the main concerns with hydraulic fracturing is the release of benzene and other aromatic hydrocarbons to the atmosphere from routine operations of the fracking process. But the inhalation risk is associated primarily with the release of radon. Radon gas is a carcinogen. and exposure to radon is the largest source of public exposure to ionizing radiation in the United States. The primary hazard associated with radon arises from the inhalation of its short-lived decay products, which are charged ions that readily attach to dust particles. Chronic exposure can lead to asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, COPD. The EPA standards under the Clean Air Act limit uranium in the air, but fracking is not covered under the Clean Air Act. It is exempt from the Federal Clean Air Act, so it's unknown what will be done about that. There also, I was going to give you just a little bit up here. Okay. These are some wastewaters that were tested in New York and in Pennsylvania. The New York Department of Environmental Conservation analyzed 13 samples of water contaminated by the hydraulic fracturing of the shale during extraction process. The DEC found that the resulting water contained levels of radium-226, some as high as 267 times the limit for safe discharge into the environment, and more than 3,000 times the limit safe for people to drink. And in a New York Times expose in 2011 released secret EPA documents that illustrated how this water is sometimes sent to sewage plants that are not designed to process the dangerous chemicals or radiation, which in some instances are used in municipal drinking supplies or are released into rivers and streams that supply the water. Trying to see. In talking about the health effects involved with hydrofracking, we must know the hazard and the exposure. Our children are most vulnerable to environmental hazards because they eat, drink, and breathe more than adults on a pound-for-pound basis. Research has also shown that children are not able to metabolize some toxicants as well as adults due to immature detoxification processes. According to the US EPA, studies have shown that toluene, which is another fracking chemical, can cause an assortment of developmental disorders in children born to pregnant women that have been exposed to toluene. And the report goes into a lot more detail, which is available on our website, www.bredl.org. But I wanted to talk about one more piece of it. One thing that we have found is that workers are going to probably be the most exposed to the radioactivity and the other stuff from the hydrofracking. The occupational limit for a radiation worker is 5,000 millirem a year. If the worker does not reach this, they do not require a device to measure their exposure to radiation. The amount of radiation to the community cannot exceed 100 millirem a year. According to a letter sent this month from the AFL-CIO, mine workers and the United Steelworkers, to the top federal safety agencies working in the hydraulic fracturing industry, exposing the workers to high levels of crystalline silica, which can carry the radioactive materials, putting them at risk of developing silicosis, lung cancer, and other debilitating disease. And another thing that we found also, and I don't have to read this, is that the piping that is used gets brittle. You know, the piping that goes down into the fracked well gets brittle and it can't be used forever. And over time, it gets hot with radiation. And there was one case in the Midwest that they found that this scrap metal had been used to build stadium bleachers in a stadium at a school. That's in this report too. A lot of it goes to the state of Louisiana, and they have a lot of concern with this because of possible inhalation or ingestion of scale particles contaminated with radium-226 and possibly other radioactive material that may become airborne during welding, cutting, or reaming of pipe containing the radioactive scale. And that doesn't include it being transported here, there, and everywhere. And this report, as well as its companion paper, which Allison just finished and we just got it uploaded, like I said, is available for free download on our website, www.bredl.org. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If not, I will be quiet.
Repeat the question.
Okay.
Thank you for doing all this work.
We also have Elizabeth reminded me, in addition to this, we have a report on our Breda website called First They Came For. And what it is I wouldn't call it a study, but it's an assessment of the history of the North Carolina air toxics regulations. What we found in our research, which is pretty chilling, and what we expect is, this was written before these bills came out, but it gives a good background about these issues. So I recommend that you go to our website also and look for First They Came For. I think the whole title is the legislators' assault on the public, and that's also available as well.
Now we will have a poem read by Michael McDowell on fracking. It's not? Okay, well, how would you like it referred to? Speech. Okay, now we will have a speech by Michael McDowell on fracking. Thank you.
My name is Michael, and my future is grim. My future is scary. Fracking has come to North Carolina under the guise of jobs and energy. We will accept the loss of our environment, fire running from our water faucets, and earthquakes caused by this horrible technology called fracking. It is the temporary dollar worth the cleanup expenses of the next generation standing before you. It may be called fracking, but we know that the real name is destruction.
I just want to take a really quick moment to let you know that I'm involved with the Lee County people who are at the heart of this, where this fracking is looking to take place, and the Lee County people that say no to fracking. And I am one of the individuals that helps with their Facebook page on this, and would just like you to know that the people in Lee County really appreciate the people all over the state that are taking on this issue to try and stop the fracking from ever coming to North Carolina. So a shout out to all of my friends in Lee County that yes, we are trying to protect the entire state. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for joining us today. We're going to continue to have out some literature, and we'll be here until 3 o'clock. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask anyone you see standing around. Thank you.